Johnson and the Conservatives are currently really in a very sticky wicket because they make a big song and dance about levelling up. But as we've seen before, this money is not really going to really solve the root of the problem, because we need to move the economic centre from London so that it's moved more around the country, and especially that we have some going on in the north. And this is really what people want, moving that economic centre away from being so London-centric. And unless the Conservatives can achieve that, which they can't, and as I've said before in other videos, people in the north who voted Conservative in the 2019 election for the very first time voted doing so knowing that they wanted their rewards for doing that. And one of the big rewards that the Conservatives are trying to dole out is of course infrastructure. And as I said at the beginning, just because you build infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have a positive economic impact. Sometimes building infrastructure for infrastructure's building's sake doesn't really apply very well. I mean, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, HS2 is a clear example. But not really. HS2 and having high-speed rail, when every other country in the world has high-speed rail and we don't, you know, it's not that good. And like I say, most of HS2 is not just going to be about passengers. It's also going to be about cargo as well. And of course, HS2, as I've said before, has a lot of money that when it gets to certain areas unlocks the ability for local rail services to be upgraded as well. For example, the Barnsley to Huddersfield line, still not electric, but that will only get that when HS2 gets here and the money gets unlocked. So Northern Rail is just sitting on that, waiting to upgrade that, and it can't do it because, again, HS2 isn't here yet. But that's the case, and it's not just rail, it's bridges, roads, bypasses, you name it. Sometimes building these things doesn't really bring a economic advantage, even though maybe a bypass is nice to have, or, you know, new motorways or new bridges, maybe not the biggest economic impact a lot of people were often expecting. So we're going to explore that today. So, as we always do at this time, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, as well as one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can of course buy me coffee. And of course, the YouTube memberships are open as well. And of course, thank you to everyone who does support the channel that way. So, on with the show. So, this comes from The Guardian, and the title is Bridges and Bypasses Win Votes. But their ability to, quote, level up Britain is far less certain. All governments love building. Fascists, communists, social democrats, even conservatives who demand austerity in other matters. Politicians can rarely resist the potential rewards for commissioning new infrastructure, from announcing to construction to even opening. The public amenities provide ministers with multiple opportunities to show voters that their administration is making a difference. Infrastructure improves everyday life, said the Chancellor Rishi Sunak back in March. This is why I've created the Levelling Up Fund, to invest $4.8 billion in high-value local infrastructure. Such investment, said the fund's prospectus, was about giving people pride in their local communities, bringing more places across the UK closer to opportunity, and demonstrating the government can visibly deliver. Presented with this kind of new uplifting language, as they usually are, new transport links and other such projects seem free of ideology, and political parties may very well be especially appealing to voters in the acrimonious area. But state infrastructure is not really neutral at all. Where it's cited, whom it benefits, and what is considered an acceptable cost. These are all insanely political considerations. For the current government, which owes its majority to new Tory seats in Northern England and the Midlands that have been neglected by the state for decades, or feel that they have been, providing new bridges or bypasses is a potentially crucial way of demonstrating that conservatism has changed. One problem with this strategy, at least, that for voters in this area, is that with infrastructure, as with much else, Boris Johnson has a history of promising but not delivering. A garden bridge across the Thames, a new airport or artificial island off the Kent coast, a bridge or tunnel to Northern Ireland. All of these eye-catching ideas have been promoted by the Tories' great salesmen, and none have been built so far. They have not yet even been concrete projects so much as unstable political signals, or of Johnson's optimism, personal ambition and disregard for difficult practical details. In a country that voted for the barely sketchy future of Brexit, offering near fantasies can go a long political way. But the day will come when even the Conservatives' mostly suggestible new voters expect them to actually build something. Another problem is that even the grandest complex projects don't always change the country as expected. 40 years ago this month, the Queen opened the Humber Bridge, then the biggest single-span suspension bridge in the world, a bridge across the Humber estuary, connecting the isolated port city of Hull with the East Midlands and the South. And this had been promised for more than a century. Yet, it did not get decisive backing until at least 1966, when Labour Prime Minister Harold Wilson faced a tricky by-election in Hull, and Labour promised a bridge and held the seat. But construction's problems and another delays ate up another 15 years, and by the bridge's completion, Hull was declining and Britain was in crisis, with an unpopular Margaret Thatcher presiding over riots and deindustrialisation. The enormous, sweeping bridge offered a very rare chance for national pride. The Queen called it a splendid advertisement for British engineering, and the opening of the ceremony featured a flypast by the Red Arrows, and the RAF jets roaring over the bridge towers and an otherwise grey sky. And it's easy to imagine Johnson appealing to a very similar ceremonies in about a few years' time. And of course, the bridge was expected to bring economic revival. If the removal of the frustration in travel is vital, as I believe the Queen said, this area must be the land of opportunity. I have every confidence that there are many here waiting to grasp it. 4 decades on, and the bridge is still a great sight. An elegant arc of concrete and steel across the tea-coloured Humber. But the region around it has changed less than many hoped. The population of Hull, unlike that of Britain as a whole, is no higher than when the bridge had opened. The handsome city centre has been regenerated, but it lacks the bustle. And Hull has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. The bridge has cut local journey times and connected families and businesses, yet the traffic on it feels light for a crossing of this size. And on the other side of the river from Hull, much of the land remains agricultural. A terraced house in Batton-upon-Humber, a town nearest the bridge, and a sleepy maze of old brick streets can be bought for over £80,000. More people like it that way. One of the bridge staff told me. They don't want change. The impact of new infrastructure on the previously overlooked places is hard to predict, especially in centralised, sometimes conservative countries such as Britain, where people and countries can be lured away from their customs locations. And of course, the gradual shift and sheer complexity of the economy also mean that it can take a long time for voters to accept, if they ever do, that such infrastructure hasn't brought enough benefit to justify the expense. The Humber Bridge cost over £385 million to build in today's money, and it was financed by government loans which have generated even larger interest charges, and which have yet to be fully paid back despite toll for bridge users. Almost everyone I spoke to locally pointed out that none said that the building of the bridge had actually been worthwhile. And a notoriously short-term politician, Johnson may not be too worried about whether his government's levelling up construction projects are actually effective in the long term. It's all about the photo opportunities and building sites that will provide the overall impression of purposeful government that are probably his first priorities. As he recently told the US magazine The Atlantic, people live by a narrative. Human beings are creatures of imagination. And he didn't sound as if he lies awake at night thinking about Northern England's precise contribution to our gross domestic product. Conservative governments have sometimes used the northeast of England in particular as a stage for displays of economic ingenuity and social cohesion. In 1987, Thatcher performed a precise, highly publicised walk around the bleak former industrial site on Teesside, then set up a development corporation there soon afterwards. David Cameron announced the Humber Enterprise Zone in 2011, and this spring the government has announced a Humber Freeport. The frequency of these initiatives could show how the Tories have treated the region without seriousness, that until their recent electoral success here was underappreciated. Or it could show that none of these schemes have actually been thought out well enough to actually really work. Northern England is just full of spectacular structures, and Johnson may actually add to them. But the economy's centre of gravity will probably stay where it has been for a long time. And in the quieter landscape of the South, governments love to build things, but power often likes to hide. And I think that could be the way of things. I've said this before. I think infrastructure and building infrastructure is needed from time to time, but sometimes you actually got to have a purpose for doing so. I mean, yeah, the Humber Bridge, great. It's reduced travel times and, it's made travel a bit easier. I think HS2, when it's finally built, will be, good. Will it provide a big economic impact? I think it will. Not as big as people say it will be, but it will be a good infrastructure project. And, these other things that, Johnson, quote, plans to build with this, I don't think we will see any proper economic impact. Like I say, the North gets treated like this all the time. As we just mentioned there, the Conservatives come, announce something, and then that's it. It's just a big song and dance and a big show. Like I say, I can't believe that people in the North fell for the levelling up jargon. Hopefully, maybe at the next election, they'll have realised that, once again, this was just more, smoke and mirrors, and that there was nothing really substantially actually done or even planned. Or even if there is a construction site, then the question must be asked, how is this actually going to economically benefit the North? Because until we pivot away and move the centre of economic prosperity from London, which the Conservatives are all about, they ain't about breaking that economic prosperity. Because if Johnson wanted to do that, then he could introduce policies to do that. But again, we ain't seeing that. So once again, the levelling up campaign is just what every single Northerner should really know, and know far better, that it's just more smoke and mirrors, and that, like many people who voted who went out there for the first time and voted Conservatives, they should at least learn a lesson that Johnson isn't going to deliver. And even though you want your funding, you want your town prosperity or whatever, the Conservatives really aren't going to deliver, because other than just giving money, there's no purpose behind it, there's no project behind it, there's no long-term goals or aims behind them. And that's what the North really needs. So, with that said, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as one-off donation link. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.